Hi, I'm Erik Sowinski. I'm a professional 800-meter runner and pace setter. Welcome to the ATHLèTES MONDIAUX podcast.
Hi everyone, you're listening to the Athlètes Mondiaux podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Athlètes Mondiaux is French for athletes of the world. My name is Mathilde, and in this podcast, I interview track and field athletes from all around the world in their native language when I speak it. My guest today is Erik Sowinski, world and bronze medalist in the 800 back in 2016, and two-time world relays winner with the American 4x8. In this episode, Erik tells us about his career in the 800, about his amazing longevity, but also about how he started pacing and what can make pacing challenging. You're listening to the original interview in English, but the interview is also available dubbed in French for those of you who understand French better than English. Enjoy! Hi Erik, welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
How do you usually introduce yourself when you meet people for the first time, people outside of track and field?
I tell them I'm a professional runner, and then they go into questions asking if I run the marathon generally. And then I kind of have to explain that that's a little too far for me. So,
Yeah. When you were 10, what did you want to grow up to be?
I was always like a big baseball, basketball player growing up. So I always wanted to be like a professional athlete, but I never thought that it would be in track and field.
Why not?
I didn't run at all as a kid much or anything, so I didn't start running until my junior year of high school when I was about 16.
Okay.
So up until then, I was just playing a lot of soccer, basketball, baseball, and I was just more in those sports.
And why did you start running?
So after my freshman year of high school, the coach told me I was too small to play on the varsity soccer team.
Okay.
So I had some friends that were on the cross country team, and I decided to go out for cross country, and then track and field kind of followed after that, and that's when I really started running. So I was about 15, 16 at that time.
And were you a competitive kid?
Very. I've always been a very competitive kid, and so I think that that's really helped. My transition through college into the professional ranks. It's just I love to race, I love to compete. So
And when did you start training with your current coach? Because I know you've been together for quite a long time.
yeah, fall of 2008. So almost 15 years now.
How did you meet?
So he was my college coach. So he
Okay.
he recruited me when I was a senior in high school, and I ended up going to University of Iowa, and he was an assistant coach there at the time. So he coached me all throughout college, and then about halfway through my professional career, he took over the head coaching job at the university, but he still coaches me as well. So yeah, I've been doing this for almost 15 years now.
He ran the 400 hurdles, right?
Yeah. 400 hurdles. He was the world silver medalist in Paris back in early 2000. So yeah.
And how do you explain this longevity? What I mean is, you've been together for a long time, doesn't happen that often. How do you explain it?
Um, I think a lot for me is just how communicative and transparent he's been on everything, whether it was, stuff on the track or off the track. And, he's been through a lot of this himself. I mean, he had over a decade long professional career. And so I just really bought into what he, thought was the best for me in my professional career. I just kind of know he always has my best interest at heart. And so I've really bought into everything he's told me to do. I think that, having that sense of being comfortable with a coach just makes everything that much easier. Like I don't second guess anything that goes on. And, he knows me really well. And I know that that's probably the best thing for me. And so just having him as like that father figure has been pretty awesome for me.
Do you have a say in your training program, or is it just his decision?
No, it's definitely, back and forth. I think that the more we've done this together, we both kind of realize, what I need and what helps me excel. I think that, athletes can sometimes be pretty stubborn and not want to change things up. But if there's a day that I go to the track and he thinks that, something looks off, I don't look great, like he'll adjust things from there. So he has a really good eye for that kind of thing. I think that's also helped the longevity part is that, he kind of knows what I need, but knows when he looks at me if he needs to, pull back that day just to make sure nothing bad happens. So
Hmm. And who else is on your team? I mean, other athletes or even other people on your team, like maybe physios, mental coaches, or whatever.
yeah, so I do pretty much all of my training on the track by myself. I've done that
Okay.
since I graduated college. So there's some friends that I'll go for runs with and stuff every once in a while. But as far as like the bulk of my work, I do all of that by myself.
Do you like it?
I do. It can be tough, but I think, being able to be on my own schedule and just getting to know my body really well and doing all of those reps by myself, it just makes the pacing and the racing for myself that much easier because, I'm used to doing everything from the front. So if I have to be in the front of a race, like it's not an uncomfortable position for me to be in. So,
Okay.
and as far as team goes, I've been very fortunate since I graduated college that everyone at the university has told me basically, hey, if there's anything you need, it's for you. So I've been able to use the athletic training staff, the weight training staff, all of that at the university. So I've been really fortunate to have them in my corner as well.
Where are you exactly? Where are you based?
So I had been in Iowa City for the last 14 years. This past fall, I actually moved out to Colorado, kind of as more of a personal change. So I'm still training with my college coach. I still go back there and do some training and whatnot. But now I'm in the Denver area in Colorado.
You gained global attention in 2013 when you broke the US record in the 600 meters at Melrose Games. Can you tell us the story? Because I
Yeah.
know you were not planning on racing at the Melrose Games, right?
It was fun. So I 2013 indoors was my first professional season. So I
Hmm.
had, no contract, no anything. So I went to Europe indoors for the first time. Had never been out of the country, didn't have a passport. So I did some races over in Europe and ran pretty well. I ran a pretty good 600 in Moscow in January.
Okay.
So I did some races, came back to the States, and I remember it was a Wednesday afternoon, and we did a really hard workout on the track. And I checked my phone after the workout. It's like 4 p.m. And Ray Flynn, the meet organizer for Milrose, called me and said a lane opened up in the 600 and asked if I wanted to race. So it was obviously an opportunity we couldn't turn down. So I ended up flying out there Friday, got there Friday evening before a Saturday evening race. I was working full time at a running shoe store at the time.
Okay.
So like 5 or 6 guys from the shoe store also made the trip out there with me and ended up having a great race and breaking the American record while wearing a jersey with the running store logo on the front, which was pretty
That's
cool.
cool.
So yeah,
Who else was in the race?
Nick Simmons, Dwayne Solomon were the two big ones. I mean, so that was built up as a big race between those guys. I mean, they were fourth and fifth in the London Olympics 800, a few months prior to that. So those were the two like real big names in that race, and I was just able to have a good race and surprise some people there. So
So was it because no one expected you to win? How do you explain your win?
I think so, yeah. I mean, in 2012, I only made the semifinals at the Olympic trials. And then I had run a pretty good 600 leading up to that. I think I ran like 1:15.9 in Moscow leading up to that, which was quick at the time. I think the American record was like 1:15.6, so it was close. But I don't think a lot of people had seen that result or really knew who I was. So I definitely came out of nowhere and surprised some people.
And did it change anything in maybe your self confidence?
I think so, yeah. I mean, in college, I always ran from the front and it was something I was comfortable with, but being in that level was something that was a little bit intimidating. I mean, having seen Nick and Dwayne run 142 and I was, I ran 145.9 and it was a big breakthrough my last collegiate race. But I think that, being there and seeing how competitive I was with a lot of those guys, it really told me that I could be successful at it.
So would you say the 600 is your favorite distance?
Yeah, definitely. I wish it was. I mean, indoors sometimes they have U.S. championships in the 600, which is fun. I've run a few 600s outdoors. I think that would probably have been my best event, and I think it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I wish that we were able to do that a little bit more.
So what did you think of pacers before becoming one yourself?
Yeah, I think it's fun because I've raced so much in Europe all across the globe that I've roomed with a lot of the pacers sometimes at these competitions. So, I mean, Matt Shearer, he was pacing a lot of races. Bram Som was pacing a lot of races, so I know
Yeah.
those guys and knew them very well. So, I've always had a lot of good interactions with them, and I think that a good pacemaker just makes the race so much easier for everyone else. So I think that a lot of my best races had come because of a really good job from the pacemaker. So it's kind of cool to be able to fill those shoes for some other athletes now.
Later on in the interview, I'll ask more questions about pacing because you're the best person to ask these questions.
Yeah, for sure.
But first, I'd like to talk a bit more about your personal career. I have a feeling you love racing indoors. Why is that?
Uh, it's just something that's really comfortable for me being in Iowa for such a long time. Like the winters are really, really cold, so we don't get to do a lot of stuff outside. So we're on the indoor track all the time. It's really comfortable, and I think that that's led to a lot of my indoor success. Is just that I, am really, really comfortable on an indoor track because I train on it, 4 or 5 times a week as opposed to a lot of these other athletes. So I think that's why I found some more success indoors than I had outdoors.
Okay. You also won the World Relays twice with Team USA on the
Yeah,
4x8,
correct.
which is also a pretty uncommon event. I think
Yeah,
it's no longer part of the World Relays, is it?
no.
Can you tell us about the experience?
Yeah, I mean that was a lot of fun. In college in the US, like there's a couple of big relay meets that we would look forward to every year. So for me it was Drake relays and we get to run some, kind of obscure relays. They had a sprint medley relay, a distance medley relay, the 4x8. So kind of getting to do that after college was a lot of fun and I had known a lot of the guys on those relays really well. They're some of my good friends. So being able to come together and not compete against those guys for once was a lot of fun. And then, getting to to wear the US jersey. I think, we came within like a second and a half of the world record. So it was kind of fun to be able to do that with those guys.
You won a medal in 2016 at the World Indoors.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say the World Indoors were actually tougher than the US trials? How does it compare? Because I know making Team USA is already like sometimes
Yeah.
athletes say once you've made Team USA, the tough part is done. What's your take on that?
I think outdoors making Team USA is probably a little harder than indoors.
Okay.
Sometimes athletes pass up on an indoor season. And I think that when you get to a world indoor championship, there's so few athletes compared to outdoors that everyone is really, really good. Not
Hmm.
to say that everyone's not really good at an outdoor championship, but it just kind of condensed a little bit. Like I feel like the qualifiers at world indoors are kind of like a semis at a world outdoors. But yeah, I mean, making a US team outdoors is definitely hard. So for us, like we were always race Thursday, Friday, Sunday. So usually it'll take 147, 148 to get out of the first day. There's been days where it's taken 145 low to get out of the semifinal to make a final. There's been a couple of years where it's taken 143 to make the US team. So
Yeah.
you have to be pretty fit to be able to do that 3 out of 4 days, and there's some years that's pretty crazy.
Do you sometimes wish you you had another passport and you it would have been easier to qualify for the World Championships or the Olympic Games?
I've definitely thought about that, but it also kind of, when you do make those teams, it makes it that much more special knowing that,
Mhm.
you were able to go up against these guys and you were one of those best three guys after three pretty hard rounds. So it's definitely crossed my mind, but I wouldn't have wanted to do it any other way.
And did you have any favorite race scenarios for the 800? How did you prepare for different race scenarios? And did you have any favorite?
So, I mean, my favorite like period of US 800 running was when Dwayne Solomon and Boris Berrien were both still around, because those guys would always go out really, really hard. So, I mean, it wasn't uncommon for us to go out in 49 high and in 800, and that's something that was comfortable for me if I was able to follow them. So, not having to be the guy to lead those races was always kind of my favorite scenario to be in. So I do miss having some of those guys around because
Mhm.
now, especially in championship racing, especially probably the last 5 or 6 years, guys kind of always defer to you to lead the race just because that's what they're used to. And that's what I've been pretty successful with in the past. So I do miss having those guys to lead. But I also feel like I've been in so many 800s throughout my career that there hasn't been a situation that I'm uncomfortable with. So if it's a slow race, like I know what I need to do to give myself a chance to qualify or win that race. And if it's fast, if I have to take it out, I've done that plenty of times also. So
Is it something you practice in training? Different scenarios? How do you prepare for that?
yeah, so I don't know that we practice different scenarios as much as like we do a lot of practice, like changing through different gears in practice. I think that that's really important in the 800 because, generally they say like you get one big move in an 800, and depending when it is, you need to be prepared to be able to change that gear and kick, whether it's with 400 to go or 100 meters to go. So we do a lot of practice with, changing gears at different points in reps just to, be able to move the legs a little faster no matter where in the race we have to go. So.
You have an amazing longevity. And I wanted to talk about your before bed routine and maybe other routines you might have.
Yeah,
You have a vote injury
yeah.
pretty much your entire career. So is it because you have routines like that?
I think so. I think just consistency with everything that I've done has helped that. And that's, a lot of credit to my coach and the other training staff that's helped me develop that. So I think that like one big thing for us is that like weightlifting in the weight room is a very consistent thing, which I don't know that that's super common with a lot of 800 runners. So I mean, I'm in the weight room 3 times a week, and we really do lift like a sprinter. So we do
Okay.
a lot of heavy lifting. So I think that that's definitely helped. Just kind of as I've gone through the college transition into the pros, realizing that hey, like I do need 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. I do need to be conscious of what I'm eating and getting in those kind of routines. And then, yeah, I do like the same, just short. It's probably 8 or 10 minutes of just like some foam rolling and stretching before bed, just kind of knowing what I need to do to feel the best the next day to get all of this work in. And that's what I try to tell a lot of the younger athletes that ask me this kind of stuff is like, hey, what has contributed to your success? And I don't think people realize that, hey, like if I start developing these routines now, like it's still going to pay dividends years and years and years later. So I think that
Mm.
that's kind of what I've been a testament to, is like showing that, hey, I've been doing this for, 10, 12 years, the same things day after day after day. And I think that the more people see that, hey, I'm a 33-year-old 800-meter runner who still hasn't had any sort of major injuries and is still competing at a pretty high level, that, just being able to see that, year after year, I think has shown people that these little things really do matter and can make a
Yeah.
difference in the long run.
What exactly do you do before bed?
Just like a little stretching foam rolling routine, just yeah, just general muscle groups. I think, probably a lot of things that people think and do in their general warm-ups if they're warming up or see a lot of people do. It's not nothing rocket science, but just, I think that me being able to do that definitely, like, I feel good waking up every morning and knowing that, hey, like I've done this the day prior and got that little bit extra of recovery in, and I feel good going into the workouts, which, I feel like a lot of people sometimes they don't do this stuff the night before and they go into a workout feeling a little stiff, feeling a little
Mhm.
tired. And generally for me, like, I know what I need to do leading up to it and just been that same routine.
And what about warm up? Do you have the same warm up every time?
Yeah, I've done the same exact same warm up for since I started at the University of Iowa, so 2008. I remember showing up to the first day of practice, and Coach Woody had a piece of paper with the dynamic warm up and everything that they do, and I've done that same warm up every single day for the last nearly 15 years for competition and workouts. It's the exact same.
How long is it?
It's about an hour, depending on the call room times. Sometimes I'll stretch it out just a little bit. So, like if a call room is going to be like 30 minutes or longer, then I'll probably do my warm up for maybe like 70 minutes, just knowing that I'm going to be like sitting a little bit or walking to
Okay.
call rooms and whatnot. But I feel like generally it's about 60 minutes before.
Okay. When did you start strength training? You said you lived like a sprinter, but when did it
Yeah.
start?
Not until college. So kind of a funny story also. I didn't lift at all in high school, not in track, not in basketball, not in soccer or anything. So I got to Iowa and saw all these guys lifting and I had no idea what I was doing. The first probably 2 or 3 months, I was lifting with a broomstick, trying to learn all of these movements that these guys were doing. So I was definitely not one of my strengths at that time, but it's kind of something that I've developed along with my running to be one of my strengths, I feel like, compared to a lot of 800-meter guys.
Do you have favorite exercises in the gym?
We do a lot of like hang cleans and power cleans is probably the biggest thing for me. I think that works a lot of the muscle groups that make me successful. I'm a pretty quick 800-meter guy. Like I've got some pretty good top end speeds. I feel like that's been one of the things that I've been able to develop to aid in that. So that's probably my favorite lift to do in the weight room.
What are you the most proud of? Is it maybe having run, I have to have a look at my notes, over 200 times sub 150, over 100 times sub 147, making 16 USA Championship finals, being the three-time US champion? What are you the most proud of?
Probably the longevity. So not any like specific number or anything, but I think you don't see a lot of professional track and field runners in general that make it over a decade, let alone 800-meter
Mhm.
athletes. I mean, I've fought through a lot of struggles of, not having any sort of contract out of college. I emailed every single agent on USA Track and Field's list and nobody responded to me. So I had to do all of that by myself. So I think that just having dealt through some of those trials and tribulations and being able to be successful for as long as I have, I think that that's probably the thing I'm the most proud of.
And do you believe this consistency is was key in becoming a good pacer?
I think so. And I think a lot of it is the relationships that I've been able to build because of being such a consistent racer myself. I've never pulled out of a race for any reason. I know a lot of the meet directors really well. And I think that, they've seen that when I go into a race, like I'm going to compete, I'm going to try and give myself a chance to win that race. And they want someone with that confidence and that, ability to be able to be the one to lead their races in the future. So like
Mhm.
that they've seen that, hey, I've been able to race through any sort of conditions and be successful. So having someone who's been through that as an athlete themselves, I think is what they look for in someone when they're looking for a pacer. So I think that's definitely contributed a lot to that.
Are there any major differences between the US circuit and the European circuit?
Yeah, I mean, it's in Europe. I love it because there's times I could go over there and race 3 or 4 times in a week. Just go from meet to meet and compete a bunch. Where here in this, it's not like that at all. There's a few times where we can race maybe 2 or 3 weekends in a row, but in general, there's not really any races during the week. So
Mhm.
being able to do that, 2 to 3 times a week over in Europe just has aided in my training and something that I really enjoy. I think is what made me successful compared to a lot of 800 guys here in the States, because you don't get a lot of 800 guys that go over to Europe and race in general for 800 in the US. So I think that that's contributed a lot for me. And, I really enjoy going over there and traveling and getting to compete in as many meets as I can.
So, how did you start pacing? Was it your decision or was it a coincidence?
Definitely a coincidence. The first race I ever paced was when Yomif broke the mile world record at BU.
Okay.
So we had US championships indoors the week prior, and they asked if I would help them out and pace this race. And so I'd never done anything like that. So I paced the first 800 of that race. He ended up breaking the mile indoor world record, which was pretty awesome. And then I didn't do any pacing for like 3 years after that. And then I remember racing at 800 in New York. It was like May of 2021. and Spencer Barden, meet director for all of the meets in England and in Doha, contacted me and was like, "We need a pacer for the 1500 in Gateshead." So I flew to Gateshead last minute, got there the morning of the race from the US, paced the 1500, did a pretty good job. I think after that, I've just been getting more and more contacts to pace races just based on that. So it was kind of out of nowhere. Like I wasn't planning on pacing that race. It wasn't something we put on the schedule. It was just Spencer's always been great to me, like letting me in all of the races that he puts on. So it's kind of trying to give back to him a bit, and it's paid off for me in the long run, just getting all of these pacing jobs. So it was definitely a coincidence.
I heard someone call you the running metronome on another podcast. I also heard you say you were a musician. You play, is it the trombone or something?
I played the trombone all through high school. I don't play it anymore, but yeah, I definitely did that. So
Okay. But do you think it helped with rhythm and stuff like that?
yeah, no, I definitely think so. I was also in like marching band in high school, so I think that
Okay.
was kind of the same, just with that rhythm. For me, also, I think what's helped is I've always been really good with numbers. Like I was always big in math growing up and through high school. So, being able to see the clock at the track, like I know where I need to be at what point in the race. I think that's also helped. So I think that those two things have probably definitely contributed, just along with being generally good in pacemaking through workouts. It's something that I've always been pretty comfortable with.
So how does it usually work? Who contacts you? Is it meet organizers, the athletes themselves? Who is it?
It kind of depends. I mean, I've had athletes, I've had agents, I've had meet directors. So just kind of depends. It's generally a combination of all three. So I have more requests than I can even fulfill
Okay.
these days, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of just comes from all over the place. So my email inbox is pretty full all the time.
Okay. And could you maybe even be asked by an athlete to come pace for maybe not for the win, but just for a PB? Could it happen?
Yeah, I've had that a couple times. Is an athlete that's either going for a PB for a national record that wants a certain pace, even if they know they're not going to be the athlete that's going to win that race. So I've definitely had that a couple times too.
Okay. Can you talk us through what happens before a race? So do you have your say in the times you ask to hit, or do you just do what you're told to do, even if you think it's stupid or too fast or crazy or
I do what I'm told, but I'm usually pretty adamant that for me, like coming from an 800 background, I'm not very comfortable going over like 1,000 meters for a
Mhm,
1500. So I think that there's no pace they could ask for in a 15 that I can't accomplish through 1,000.
mhm,
But if they want something beyond that, I try to tell them that I'm not super comfortable and might not be the athlete to be the best to pace that race. And as far as like an 800 goes, if I pace an 800, I think it's the same way. Like there's not a pace they could ask for through 600 that I wouldn't be comfortable doing. But I've definitely had to tell them sometimes, like, hey, if you were adamant on someone trying to make it to 1,200 meters in a 1500, you might want to look elsewhere. And it's no offense taken to me, but like I'm not the athlete that's physically capable to do those kind of things. So I'm pretty transparent as far as that goes.
what is the most crucial part of pacing a race?
I think not getting out too fast. I think that you'll see that, especially in a lot of 1500s. Sometimes they'll ask for, I don't know, 151, 152 through 800, but sometimes you'll see an athlete go out in 52 or 53 for the first 400, and that just kind of takes a lot out of the legs of the racers.
Mhm,
So that it's not getting out too hard. Even just making sure, like for me, doing this so many times with so many of the same guys, I think that they realize that, hey, he's going to be spot on through the first 200 meters. So I don't need to get out super hard. I don't need to be in front of him.
mhm.
Like if I'm just on his shoulder, like he's going to get me through where I need to be. So that's the biggest thing for me, is making sure I don't go out too hard and can help those guys.
So what do the meet directors tell you? Is it just the time you need to hit when stepping out? Or is it intermediate time, split times?
Generally intermediate time. So usually it's like a certain time through 400, a certain time through 800, and then a certain time through 1,000.
Okay.
And a lot of times the first 400 is always requested to be a little bit faster than the second 400, just to make sure guys aren't super bunched up. One of the hardest ones I've had to do, I think, was Jakob a couple of years ago when he wanted 221, but he wanted straight 28.2, 28.2, 28.2, 28.2. So that's a little bit more difficult for me. So yeah, that was but it just kind of depends on what the athlete is comfortable with. So
Okay. What is the most challenging part for you?
oh, that's hard. I don't know, the most challenging thing, the part that kind of stresses me out the most is knowing that the athletes, their ultimate goals are dependent partially on me.
Mm,
So I want to make sure that I'm successful, and I know that I'm not going to be perfect every single time, but I want to make sure that I do to the best of my ability that day to get them through where they need to be. So I think that's the hardest thing for me, is just, kind of calming those nerves and knowing that, I'm good at what I do, but I do kind of have those second thoughts sometimes.
So what is more stressful, racing or pacing?
Probably pacing for me, just because in a race, like, you don't think as much. Like, I don't look at the clock when I race. I don't look at the other athletes when I race. Like, I know where I want to be in relation to the other competitors when I race. And at the end of the day, like, I'm going to try and kick with 200 meters or 150 meters to go. And sometimes it's going to go well, sometimes it's not. But when you're pacing, you kind of have to be spot on every time, and you have to be thinking and looking and knowing where everyone is. So it's definitely a little bit more stressful for me when I do that.
Would you have any tips for aspiring pacers?
Yeah, I think just be confident. And I think also, like, make sure you're racing yourself. I think that's kind of something you can't mimic in training. You can't mimic doing anything else besides, like, being competitive and pushing your body to the limits. I think that that's what's helped me is, I still race multiple times a year, and I still have raced pretty well. And that just makes pacing that much more comfortable for me. Like, if I
Mhm.
can run, 144, 145 in the 800 myself, like, knowing that if I need to go through in 151 is pretty easy. So I don't train as if, 151 is a goal for me or anything. It's still, training to be an elite 800 runner. I think that that's really helped me, just my confidence and physical ability to know that I can, do these pacing jobs every 2 or 3 days if asked for.
So has your training changed since you started pacing?
Not at all. No. So I still train 100% as if I'm a professional 800-meter runner, and that's all that I do, because that's what's brought me success in the past. So, we do that, and then if I do some of these pacing jobs, like, a lot of times we'll use it as a little bit. If I'm only pacing one race at a meet, like, I'll do a little bit of a workout afterwards sometimes, just to simulate it as more of a workout. As far as the week looks, like, we don't structure things any differently when I'm pacing versus just generally training to be an 800 guy.
Okay. Who decides the pace? I mean, I guess the people you're supposed to help know about it and will then follow you because they know you're trying to help. But what if it
Right.
doesn't happen?
And I don't know where it comes from all the time. I think you see it less in the 1500 than the 800. I think guys in the 1500 generally follow a little bit better than the 800 guys. And I don't know why that is. It's kind of funny. I feel like when you go to these big 800s, like 50.5 for some reason is just this number everyone always throws out to be the first 400 of the race. Like, I remember in Doha last year, they asked for 50.5. It was the first big race of the year for a lot of these guys. And I got to the cut, and there was nobody.
Mm.
Nobody was even close. So, obviously I slowed down to try and help these guys and do my job, but we ended up coming through in like 54. So it went from being 50.5
Yeah.
to 54. So it definitely happens, but it's not, I mean, it's not something that, I get angry about or anything. Cause at the end of the day, like, I can just adjust how I'm running, what I need to do to still be able to hopefully help them.
But do you get paid no matter what? I mean, if you are too far ahead and no one's following, you're not really helping anyone.
Right.
But slowing down means you're not doing what you were told to do. So how
Right.
does it work?
So I still get paid either way. And I think that I've developed enough of a relationship with a lot of these meet directors that they realize that I have a pretty good gauge on what I need to do to help the athletes out. I think that that's ultimately the job of a pacemaker, right?
Yeah.
It's to help the athletes. So if I'm 20 or 30 meters ahead, I don't think that I'm helping anyone out. So I try to at least adjust that and at least give them someone to follow a bit. And I haven't had any complaints from anyone when I've done anything like that. So at least not yet.
Okay. And do you use the screen? If there's a screen in the stadium, do you use
Yeah,
it?
yeah. So screens are nice, just being able to look up and see where everyone is, and without having to look behind you and risk stepping on the rail or anything. So I definitely do use the screens when they have them. It's a nice perk to have.
So you and I met in Liévin this year and last year, where you paced the 1500 meters. Both times there were two pacers, you and Julien Ronc. How does it work? Because you stepped out at 1000 and he had stepped out 100 meters before you.
Right.
So how does it work? Do you guys talk to each other before the race? And whose job is tougher?
Yeah, so I'm usually the first pacemaker in everything I do. So being the second one is kind of a little bit of a different feel for me.
Mhm.
But Julian, he's done a great job both years, and I think he probably has a little bit of the more stressful job in those races, just being the first guy and making sure he doesn't, go out too hard. But yeah, we definitely talk beforehand, and he's confident in his abilities, and I know that he's gonna get the job done. So I'm kind of able to even shut my mind off a little bit more because I know that all I have to do is follow him, and if he does his job, whether he drops out at 800 or drops out at 900, then I don't have too much more to do.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was definitely been a little bit of a different spot for me because usually I'm the first pacemaker in a lot of these 1500s as opposed to the second guy.
But why two pacers? What difference does it make?
I think knowing they have two guys, if for some reason one guy doesn't feel good, one guy's having an off day, like
Mhm.
you know that you'll get one guy who can at least get you to 900 or 1,000 meters, which is kind of the sweet spot I feel like for a lot of these guys. Like if they get someone who can make it to 1,000, that they can run 500 meters on their own pretty comfortably. So
Okay.
like for a lot of the bigger races, that's why you'll see two of them, just knowing that hey, not everyone's going to have their best day all the
Mhm.
time. Sometimes guys aren't going to feel great, even the pacemakers. So just a little bit of a safety net to have for some of these competitions, I think.
Okay. And do you use the wave light, or is it a help for you?
I think it can be, especially when guys are going for a record. Guys, want to follow that pace. I think that you've also seen some races where the wave light is also kind of irrelevant. But for me as a pacer, I mean, honestly, it makes things that much easier where I don't have to look at the clock at all, especially if guys are following me. I just, look at the blue and the green lights and all I have to do is follow those around the track. So
But then, no offense, but what kind of help can you give that the wave light can give?
yeah, no, this is definitely a question I've gotten a lot, and I think that there's also something to be said for being able to run behind someone else. So like the athletes, like I know they don't look at the wave light at all. They just, as far as I've been told, like they just look at the pacemaker and follow them around the track. Especially when you get outdoors too, like weather comes into play and that kind of stuff. The wave light definitely helps the pacers, but there's something to be said being able to follow someone around the track and making your race that much easier. So I know for a fact that like these guys, especially in the 1500, like to be able to follow pacers for 2/3 of the race and not just try to follow a light around the track because it's a little bit more stressful being the first guy out in front as opposed to having a couple guys that they are behind.
So you don't think you're going to lose your job if the wave light is used everywhere? Meets are still going to need you.
Unless they can put like a figure connected to the wave lights that also goes for it, which maybe that would happen. But I think if it's just the wave lights, that I should hopefully have a job for a couple more years.
Okay. And is your job easier indoors then because there's no wind? You're in the front, so
It can be. I think it depends. Outdoors, I personally enjoy a little bit more because there's usually a clock at every 100 meters.
okay.
So I can see a clock 4 times when I'm going around the track, as opposed to sometimes these indoor races, it's strictly at the finish line. And I've also done some races where there's like not even a clock right at the finish line. It's like a scoreboard way, way up above. And so I'm kind of looking, trying to see where it's at. So it kind of depends on the venue. But I think for me, like I'm more comfortable outdoors, just knowing that there's 4 clocks at a lot of these tracks. And I can do that quick math in my head and know where I need to be. The weather doesn't bother me too much.
But how do you do it if the clock is hard to see?
I've had a couple weird ones indoors this year where like I got to the venue. I didn't get to the venue the day before just because of travel and had no idea where the clock was going to be. So I'm kind of looking around trying to find it. But like that's where the innate ability of a pacer comes into play also, right? Like I also know like the rhythm of what I need to do to run, 55, 56. So that also comes into play. But being able to see a clock is just a little bit more reassuring for me knowing that I'm where I need to be. But as far as like the general paces, like I have a pretty good feel for what I need to do. So if there's not one there, I've still been pretty close.
Okay. I have a few dumb questions, but I'm
Yeah,
not afraid to look dumb. So, are you allowed to pace women?
I don't think so. I think if it was a mixed race, if they ever had like a mixed race, that I could pace that. But I do not believe that like for a World Athletics sanctioned event that a male can pace a female.
Okay. Would you be allowed to pace the second part of a race if there were two paces running one after the other? Is it allowed?
I think so. I've never seen anyone do it, but I've also wondered that same question. Like if I did the first 800 of a 1500 and then sat out for 400 meters and ran the last 300, I don't know. I think technically it would be allowed. I don't know if that takes away from the spirit of the race itself.
Mm.
Could be, but I think that would be allowed.
Are you allowed to finish the race? I mean, I guess you're allowed to finish, but
Right.
are you allowed to win the race if you feel like? Today's a good day.
I've never been told not to.
Mm.
There's been a couple 800s where I've thought about it, just like Doha last year where they go out in 54 and the winner was like 148 or 149, and I knew that I could probably be pretty competitive. But I also don't want to like mess up someone else's race and then that jeopardize any pacing jobs. for me in
Yeah.
the future. So I've definitely thought about it, but I don't think it's something I'll ever do.
Okay. Do you keep track of how many world records, personal best, national records you helped achieve?
I haven't. So I've started to put a list together. I've been starting to go back. Someone mentioned me the same thing a couple of weeks ago. It's like, hey, that'd be kind of a fun thing to see. So I've started going back through some results to do that. So I know, Matt Shear, when he was a pacemaker, he had a website with everything, the kind of personal records he's paced, national records, everything like that. So it was a pretty cool stat to see. So it's something I'd like to be able to put together, and I've started doing that.
And if someone breaks a world record, they obviously going to need to be tested for doping. Do you need to be tested for doping as well?
So I've still been just based on my own 800 running. I'm still in the testing pool. So I do get tested a lot outside of competition. I don't get tested like because someone breaks a world record. They don't also test the pacer. But I have had some competitions where I have been the pacemaker, and just based on some meets, it's like, hey, whoever's wearing the number 10 hip sticker
Mm,
is the one that's going to be drug tested. So I do
yeah.
still get drug tested sometimes as a
Okay.
pacer, but not specifically like when someone breaks a record.
Do you understand purists who say pace free racing is real racing?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that viewpoint, but I also think it's hard with how strict a lot of these standards have gotten for, world championships, for the Olympics. And that's hard to do by yourself, I
Mm,
think. So I think that, I understand like the purist racing. I think that that's what championship racing is for. Like that's why we have a world championships. That's why we have an Olympics without pacemakers.
yeah.
But I do think that as long as we have these like strict time standards to get to go to these premier competitions, I think you'll always have people prefer to have pacemakers in the races, especially the athletes will say that.
So you said you're still racing yourself.
Yeah.
How do you see your future in track and field?
So I ran 145.5 last year before US championships, and then got COVID for the first time 8 days before the championships.
Oof.
So, I mean, I still made it through all three rounds. I made the final. I didn't run as well as I wanted to in the final, but, I think I'm still one of the best 800-meter runners in the US. Do I think I'm one of the best three guys on just one all out race? Maybe not, but I think I might be one of the best three guys during 3 rounds in 4 days. So I think that as long as I'm consistent in what I do, I think that I can at least give myself a chance to hopefully make one more US championship team before I retire. And that's probably my ultimate goal for me as a racer.
And are you still unsponsored?
Still unsponsored. I've had a couple talks, but nothing concrete yet. So
It's a bit crazy.
it's funny, and I don't know exactly where it comes from because when I was an athlete, one of the big things companies always talked about was TV time and being visual as an athlete. And now that I bring this up to the same people, they kind of don't say much about that, which is kind of funny because ultimately, like, do get a lot of TV time in a lot of
Yeah.
these major races. I'm probably the person that's on the screen almost the most. And so, yeah, so I don't know exactly what the reasoning is behind not having a sponsor, but at the end of the day, like, it's kind of out of my control. So all I can do is, control what I do on the track and give as much visibility as I can. And if someone wants to take advantage of that, then they're able to. But so far I haven't had any luck.
What do you think you have to bring to your brand?
I think just, even beyond the visibility, I think that a lot of brands, a lot of sports marketing, I don't think they see everything that goes on behind the scenes with a lot of these athletes. I think that, just like looking at running from a grassroots level, for me, like, I'll never turn down a podcast. I'll never turn down an interview. If any athlete messages me on Instagram, messages me on Twitter, like, hey, I'm gonna answer these questions and hopefully I can help them out and bring a positive experience to their running, their journey. So I think that I bring a lot to running and track in general from the grassroots level, and just that, hey, like, I'm always gonna be willing to help out. I think that that's something that a lot of brands don't see. Like, they see you on TV, but they don't necessarily see what you do behind the scenes. So that's something I've tried to bring up is like, hey, I'm not looking for a giant contract, just something that can help me from day to day. And I think that I do bring a lot to the sport. And I think that a lot of younger athletes do look up to me because of what I've been able to help them with. I think that that could be something that could help a brand.
We know, like, during the Olympics, athletes are not allowed to talk about their personal sponsors, and there are a lot of rules. Do you think
Yeah.
some rules would need to be changed in order for you and other athletes to find sponsors more easily?
I think it could be easier. I think the hardest thing is, right, you can have one manufacturer's logo on your jersey, and sometimes you can have one other logo on the opposite chest, but that's dependent on a lot of rules. And so for me, like, it'd be a lot easier if I could be like a Formula One driver and have
Yeah.
10 different logos on the front of my jersey. And then I have, 10 companies that are paying a fraction of what one company would have to for me to be comfortable. I understand why they have the rules, but like for me, it would be so much easier if the rules were a little bit more lenient and I could give, more visibility to more people. And I think that they'd be more willing to sponsor athletes if that were the case.
Yeah. What do you think track fans don't know about being pro on the circuit? Because we see you guys on TV. I mean, young kids want to be like you guys, and what do they not know?
It can be hard and it's a lot of work. I mean, for me, especially, I had 3 round trips to Europe over like a 3 week span indoor season. And I'm not flying first class. I'm not anything, I'm sitting back in coach in the plane. So I think that, it's not, and I enjoy, don't get me wrong, like I enjoy every minute that I get to do this, but it's not this luxurious lifestyle that you might see from a professional soccer, professional basketball
Yeah.
athlete. So it's not super pretty behind the scenes, but I think that I enjoy it. And I think that that's what's also made me successful in the longevity of my career, is just being able to adapt to all of that travel has helped me. So I think that it's tough. But if it's something that people are thinking about pursuing, I would never take back a single day of it. I've enjoyed every race I've paced, every competition I've been able to do myself, and the travel. So definitely do take advantage of it if that's what you want to do.
Are you already thinking of what you're going to be doing after retiring?
I've started to think about it more the last couple years, especially being unsponsored. It makes you think about it even a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Yeah.
I don't know like a specific job that I want to do. If I could stay in the sport of running, of track and field, I would love to do that. I think that for me, I've had so many great influences on my career and my personal life that have been because of running, that I'd like to be able to give back to the sport in that way. So I don't know if that's a sports marketing job, doing something in event management or something like that. But if I could, I'd like to be able to do something like that.
So, who were some of your inspirations?
I think, my coach has been number one. He has kind of been my coach. He's been a father figure. He's been an agent for me at times.
Mhm.
So he's been a big one for me. I would maybe enjoy coaching, but I don't think I'd want to do it at the collegiate level. I think that I would prefer to do something at the professional level. So he's been one of them. And I don't know that I have any other like super specific ones. I have a friend works for Under Armour, so he works and runs specialty for them, and just kind of having seen his journey throughout the sport from that professional side, he's been a big influence for me. He's put me into contact with some people that have helped further my career. So, he's been one of my best friends for 15 years now. So I think that he's probably been another big inspiration for me. So I think it'd probably be those two.
Are some of the other guys among your best friends, or is it hard to build friendships when you're rivals?
No, so a lot of them are my best friends, and some of them that I talk to every day. And I think that that's the fun thing about competing against these guys, is that like the work that they put in to be
Right.
successful at this level. And I think that they also recognize that like while you're rivals, when you're on the track for a minute and 45 seconds, when you step off the track, generally everyone's pretty nice about it. So like I know a lot of the 800 guys really well all across the world, and that's been fun with the pacing job too, is getting to know a lot of the 1500 guys and some of these longer distance guys pretty well.
And I'm sure they love you now because you help them.
Yeah, that definitely helped.
Are there other things people might not know about you? Maybe things that have nothing to do with track and field?
Oh, I'm a big fan of Harry Potter.
Okay.
The books, the movies. My dog's name is Neville,
Okay.
after Neville Longbottom. So I'm a big Harry Potter fan. Um, I enjoy being outside. I like, hiking. We moved to the mountains now, so I'm excited to be able to do a lot more of that. So I like spending a lot of time outside, whether it's on the track or doing stuff extracurricular off the track like that.
So you're in altitude.
Yeah, so it's like I don't know what it is in meters, but we're at like 5,500 feet here, which has also been a big adjustment for me.
Okay.
Especially because I mean I'm not someone that does like the longer stuff. For me has always been really difficult at sea level, and trying to do some of that at altitude has made it even more difficult. So that's
Okay.
been a big adjustment for me as far as training goes.
Okay. I'm going to ask you the question I ask all of my guests. The
Yeah.
podcast is called ATHLÈTES MONDIAUX. It means athletes of the world in French, because what I love the most about track and field is that it is truly universal, especially in running. What is the one thing you love the most about track and field?
The people I've been able to meet.
Hmm.
I think that would be number one. Number two is being able to travel the world. And I think that those both go into the theme of the podcast, is that it truly is a world sport. I mean, I've, some of my best friends from all across the world, and that's strictly because of being able to meet them through track and field. You get to meet so many people that have so many great stories. And I think that that's what makes track and field special, is that you get athletes from all sorts of backgrounds.
Yeah.
And so that's something I've really enjoyed, is just getting to know a lot of these people as friends, as competitors, something that I would never have been able to do if it weren't for the sport of track and field.
So you've been on the circuit for quite a long time. I'm sure you have funny stories to tell. Did you ever get something weird as a prize after winning a race? Because I know some people sometimes get jam or cheese. Anything similar?
Maybe like 3 years ago in Dessau, Germany, the 800, I won that race, and my gift was a snorkeling mask.
Okay.
So the sponsor of the 800 was, I don't remember what the sporting goods store was, but it was some sort of sporting goods store, and so my prize was a snorkeling mask. So it's probably the weird that's probably the weirdest like prize I've ever gotten from a race.
I also heard an athlete say she'd gotten a drill at a meet because just like you, a store was sponsoring her event. So yeah, she got a drill. Why not?
Yeah.
Anything you want to lead us with?
I don't think so. I think just, I mean, the main message for me is just track and field has given me so much, and anyone wanting to pursue it, I would advocate for 100%. I think that you won't be let down in what you'll learn about yourself as a person, and getting to meet so many great individuals and get to see some cool places. So I think that, track is such a pure sport to pursue it, and it's given me a lot, and hope that I can give back in the future.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Erik, if you're listening, thank you for your time. And to all of you listening, thank you. I hope you liked the episode. If you did, please share it on social media to help the podcast grow. And make sure to subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to support the podcast, please check the link in the description. That's it for today. I'll be back soon with another episode. Bye-bye.